The laughter stopped the moment the champagne bottle shattered against Daniel Reed's shoulder. For several seconds, nobody in the luxury penthouse moved. Daniel sat frozen at the center of the celebration table, his dark blue suit soaked with champagne, his hair dripping, his face burning with humiliation while the people around him laughed as if they had just witnessed the funniest moment of their lives. The woman holding the empty bottle smiled proudly, believing she had finally exposed the pathetic single father everyone in the room had been whispering about. What she did not know was that the men she had just turned into the joke of the evening secretly owned the $20 billion company whose success had brought every person in that room their fortune. If you believe kindness, second chances, and never judging someone by their appearance can change a life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, leave a comment, and subscribe to Bright Heart for more emotional stories. Daniel had arrived at the celebration without a security team, without an entourage, and without the kind of expensive watch or designer clothes that usually announced wealth before a person even spoke. He looked like an ordinary father who had somehow wandered into a room meant for people much richer and more important than him. His navy suit was carefully pressed but slightly worn at the cuffs. His shoes were polished but several years old. On his wrist was a simple silver watch that had belonged to his late wife, Emma. Daniel had refused to replace it because it was one of the few things he still had that reminded him of the woman who had once made his small apartment feel like home. The celebration was being held for the 10th anniversary of Reed Horizon, one of the largest technology and investment companies in the world. Its headquarters filled an entire glass tower downtown, and its estimated value had recently crossed $20 billion. Nearly everyone attending knew the company's founder, Daniel Reed, was expected to make an appearance. But almost nobody had actually met him. Over the years, Daniel had deliberately stayed away from the spotlight. He rarely attended public events, avoided interviews, and allowed his executives to represent the company while he focused on his daughter, Lily. That evening, however, he had come for a personal reason. Lily, who was 8 years old, had been invited to the family section of the celebration after winning a small charity competition organized by the company. Daniel had promised her he would take her, even though he hated formal parties. He wanted her to see that her father could keep promises, even after life had taken almost everything from them. Daniel had spent the previous 6 years raising Lily alone. Emma had died unexpectedly after a long illness, leaving Daniel with a broken heart and a child who still asked sometimes when her mother was coming home. Daniel never complained about the sleepless nights, the school lunches, the grocery bills, or the moments when Lily cried because she missed her mother. He simply kept going. What nobody at the party knew was that Daniel had built Reed Horizon from a tiny rented office while holding Lily as a newborn in one arm and writing business plans with the other. But Daniel had made a strange decision years earlier. He never wanted Lily to grow up believing money made someone better than anyone else. So he kept their private life modest. Their apartment was comfortable but ordinary. Daniel drove an old sedan. He bought clothes during sales. He even taught Lily to save half of every allowance she received. To him, wealth was not something to display. It was something to use responsibly. Unfortunately, not everyone at the celebration believed that way. Among the guests was Victoria Hale, a senior executive who had spent years climbing the corporate ladder. She wore an elegant pink suit and carried herself like someone who believed every room belonged to her. Victoria had heard that Daniel Reed might appear that night, but she had never seen a photograph of him that showed his face clearly. When she noticed Daniel sitting alone at the table, she assumed he was an employee's relative or perhaps a low-level manager who had somehow received an invitation. She watched him carefully as he helped Lily adjust her dress and wipe a little frosting from her cheek. Instead of seeing a loving father, Victoria saw weakness. She whispered to several colleagues that the men looked completely out of place. Soon, a few others joined in, making jokes about his old watch, his inexpensive shoes, and the fact that he seemed more interested in making sure his daughter had enough food than in networking with executives. Daniel heard some of it. He pretended not to. He had learned long ago that dignity sometimes meant refusing to fight every battle. As the celebration continued, the company's executives began praising the success of Reed Horizon. A giant screen displayed photographs from its earliest days, including the tiny office where Daniel had written the first business plan. But because Daniel's face had rarely appeared publicly, nobody connected the young founder in those old photographs to the quiet father sitting at the table. Then Victoria decided to make the evening memorable. She approached Daniel with a champagne bottle in her hand and a smile that seemed friendly enough to anyone watching from a distance. She began joking about how some people apparently confused an important corporate celebration with a family picnic. Several guests laughed. Daniel remained calm. He looked toward Lily, who was watching nervously. Victoria continued, suggesting that perhaps Daniel should leave the grown-ups to celebrate and take his daughter home. The room grew quieter, but nobody stepped in. Daniel could have revealed who he was. He could have ended the humiliation with a single sentence. Instead, he looked at Lily and remembered the promise he had made to her. He chose peace. Then Victoria lifted the bottle and sprayed champagne directly over him. The room erupted in laughter. Daniel lowered his eyes. Champagne ran down his face, his jacket, and the front of his shirt. Lily immediately stood up, frightened and angry, but Daniel gently stopped her. He did not want his daughter to remember the night as one where anger won. Then the massive screen behind them suddenly changed. The laughter disappeared. A photograph appeared of the same man sitting at the table, only years younger. The next image showed him standing beside the first Reed Horizon office. Then another appeared, showing him holding a newborn baby while signing the company's original incorporation papers. Across the screen appeared 3 words that made Victoria's face turn pale. Founder, Daniel Reed. Nobody moved. The company chairman walked quickly toward the table, followed by the board members who had been waiting for Daniel to arrive. One of them placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder and quietly apologized for the confusion. Then the chairman turned toward the room and announced what everyone had just realized: the quiet single father whom they had mocked was not an employee, not a guest, and not an outsider. He was the owner. The owner of the company. The men whose name stood on the building outside. The men whose decisions had created thousands of jobs. The men whose company was now worth $20 billion. Victoria looked at the champagne bottle still in her hand as if it had suddenly become something dangerous. Her confidence disappeared completely. The people who had laughed moments earlier now avoided her eyes. Nobody knew what Daniel would do. Daniel slowly stood. He could have fired Victoria on the spot. He could have embarrassed her in front of everyone. He could have reminded the room that she had mocked him because she believed he was poor. Instead, Daniel looked at Lily. His daughter was holding a small napkin and trying not to cry. That was when Daniel understood what mattered. He turned toward Victoria and told her that the worst mistake she had made was not embarrassing him. It was teaching a room full of people that someone's worth could be measured by their clothes, their watch, or the position they appeared to hold. Then he did something nobody expected. He forgave her. But forgiveness did not mean there were no consequences. Daniel asked the board to review the company's culture and executive behavior, and Victoria was removed from her leadership position after an investigation into several previous complaints about how she treated employees. Daniel made it clear that the company would not punish people for making mistakes, but it would not reward cruelty disguised as confidence. The following morning, Daniel arrived at the office with Lily beside him. For the first time, he introduced his daughter to the employees of Reed Horizon. He told them that everything he had built had never been about proving that he was the smartest man in the room. It had been about creating a future where his daughter could grow up believing that success and kindness could exist together. Months later, something beautiful happened. Reed Horizon launched a new foundation dedicated to helping single parents who were struggling to balance work, childcare, and financial hardship. Daniel funded the program quietly, refusing to put his name on it. When a reporter later asked why he had done it, Daniel simply explained that he knew what it felt like to carry a child in one arm while carrying the weight of the world in the other. That sentence stayed with everyone who heard it. Daniel never forgot the night he had been humiliated. But he also never allowed that night to make him bitter. Instead, he turned his pain into something that helped other families. And Lily grew up watching her father prove something far more valuable than the fact that he owned a $20 billion company. She learned that real wealth was not having the power to embarrass someone who hurt you. Real wealth was having the power to forgive them. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and subscribe to Bright Heart. Your support helps us continue bringing stories about courage, compassion, and second chances to more people. And before the story ends, I want to ask you something special. Comment, kindness is real, if you believe we should never judge a person by their clothes, their money, or their position in life. Because sometimes the person sitting quietly at the table is carrying a story far greater than anyone in the room could ever imagine. And sometimes, the greatest test of character is not how we treat the powerful, but how we